Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
Dylan, we'll try to practice tomorrow. We'll see where he's at. We'll get both him and Heinrich ready. Obviously, we made the move with Dana last week. He will call the plays this week.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker fan sports show.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast. I'm your host, David Gaspers, and I'm with Honky.
Happy Veterans Day out there to all the men and women who have bravely served this country. Thank you for your service. And in Husker world, we have some news, Dave. So we decided why not get together here. We both had the day off here, and so this was a prime afternoon to talk about some updates that came today from Coach Rhule.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just sitting back, cleaning up the house a little bit. Honky was out last weekend, so things can accumulate after 3 straight days of celebratory activity. Watching some war movies, and then I read my texts, and I'm like, "Whoa! Good thing we didn't do that show yesterday, right, Honk?"
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, part of it was maybe we weren't in our finest of shape by Sunday. We just needed some rest, but it worked out pretty well because, the big news coming out of the Matt Rhule presser is that we have a new offensive coordinator, Dana Holgorsen, who we knew came into the coaching staff last week, presumably just as an offensive consultant, will be the play caller against USC this weekend. Marcus Satterfield still on staff, sliding over to the tight end position. But wow, Honk, we talked at length over 3 days while you were out here about what could be done or should be done, in particular about the offense. And we're going to find out.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I think the one thing that we knew couldn't happen was nothing. They couldn't just continue doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. The Redcast last week, Rob and Abby and Boomer, I know they went over that as well, that the failure to do anything, it wouldn't work here. And I think maybe a comparison would be Iowa. Offensively, Iowa over the last 5-10 years, the frustration that fan base felt was year after year of not seeing any changes, any attempt to do anything different. I have no idea if this is going to work or not. We'll find out. But it adds some excitement, just like on USC's end where they switched their quarterback out, and that gives you something to prepare different for. On this end, we're making a change with a very well-known and experienced OC who's had a lot of success over his career.
Yeah, absolutely. So Holgorsen is a Mike Leach disciple, air raid guy who has had multiple successful offensive coordinator stints, going back to Oklahoma State, and I think he actually was the OC at Houston initially, then head coach at West Virginia and Houston, and has consistently produced big numbers on offense, known as a passing first guy, but also actually has a lot of mobile quarterback history. I'm sure Honky would appreciate that. Yeah. And has produced better run numbers than SAT, that's for certain. Yes. And I know you've got some great clips here that we can kind of help us walk through this conversation. But anyone thinking this is going to be a complete flip to the air raid next Saturday is probably mistaken. It's just not really possible with this short of time to install a completely new offense. But I do think elements of that will be sprinkled in, and I think the play calling itself is going to be different, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of kind of setting the table a little bit too, is what expectations as a fan base should we have for next week versus what our expectations, leave off the table right now. What's possible to do versus what's not. I don't expect, to your point there, Dave, whatever the full offense, the full Holgorsen offense that he'd want to bring here, that's not happening next week. It's not happening 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now. But what can they come in and do? They can immediately start to look at pass run ratios, and that's the play calling end of it. You can look at the entirety of the playbook and what we've been doing all season, and you figure out what has been working, what hasn't been. And I've said this, we talked about this over the weekend, Dave, before any of this news came out, was that offensively, there's been good elements of this offense. There's been some pre-snap things we were doing, especially earlier in the season, some motions, and there was just more complexity. It felt like the offense wasn't so boring and so to speak to watch.
Yep.
And I think, it's tearing some plays out of the playbook right now. They're going to go away.
Not worked.
Yeah. If they haven't worked, this is the time you put it away, right? And say, hey, that can be there for next season. And we all know, some of those different areas. We've talked about perimeter blocking and screens and all that. It's just focusing on the things you're doing well. And that's as much as anything I think that Holgorsen can immediately try to improve on and kind of go from there. But to your point, Dave, we've got some video. So let's let Coach Rhule kind of explain the process a little bit, and then we'll break it down after that.
Called him last week, had him come in, had him kind of look at everything. I think he's got a long history of success offensively, both as a head coach, but certainly as a coordinator before that. And I think he just kind of gives us a fresh perspective on looking at kind of what we're doing and who we're doing it with, and was able to sort of say, hey, let's kind of go in these directions over here. So I just think it gives us a great opportunity to have one of the great offensive minds, a guy that I've been friends with before and I trust, and excited to see what he does.
I am too.
Well said, Matt. So it's interesting. Obviously, I mean, having some sort of pre-established relationship is important. We knew that Holgorsen was in the off season, and this at least had been contemplated on what role he could potentially play. At that time, I thought maybe he'd be the kind of like a Glenn Thomas, who essentially is the QB coach now and was kind of like co-OC. I can't remember his actual title. I think that might have been it. And instead, it had to come to this point. But I do think you're going to see Holgorsen. Two things. Maybe I'll make a statement and then ask a question. I think he will utilize players a bit differently than Satterfield, like running backs, for example. I think he will look to get those guys more open into space and more creative wheel routes and all these different things. That's kind of a Holgorsen thing, I would say. Mm-hmm. What about? I mean, I feel like we just said it's not going to be air raid. Do you feel like every week though during the season we can install new plays? If Satterfield was still the OC, they could be installing new plays against that USC defense. So we could see some new concepts. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
and Coach Rhule talks a little bit about how the coaching staff's still around. Sat, for what it's worth, is still around. So it's not like Holgorsen's just taking it over and none of the existing infrastructure is in place. The terminology wise, you're not going to go and go crazy changing all this stuff with 3 weeks left, but. In fact, I think they talked about how the current staff is helping Holgorsen kind of adapt some of his language to the language we're using right now, so that that it can kind of ease some of the transition. At the end of the day, there might be a few very specific things that Holgorsen would want to see more of. I'm throwing it out here like this. Let's say it's he wants to see a little bit of two back out of the shotgun. Then you just incorporate that in. That's a personnel way of like, let's make sure we can get an H-back and a running back in the backfield at the same time if we need to add to protection. And let's focus on that. It would be a very targeted kind of focus, I think, if you're adding much to the offense. It's just not going to be like what West Virginia was doing is what we're going to start doing next week. But we're probably, for what it's worth, we're probably already doing a lot of elements of that anyways. And he had, he's been pouring through all the film and everything over the last week to try to see what are the things that I like that you're doing already and what are the things that I'm not going to bother calling,
Yeah. Which is what I think most fans have wanted to see, right? Is some just different thought process on not only the plays themselves, but when to call plays and how to actually have that the feel for the game that sometimes Satterfield feels like he's just either completely off or on, so intriguing, right?
Yeah.
One more thing, and then maybe you can play another video here. I know you got a lot of them racked up. I'll be curious to see how Holgorsen is evolving his thought, right? I mean, he was one of the most successful offensive minds in the business a decade ago, right? I mean, highly successful, especially early in that West Virginia career, with really big points, very good teams there. But he's taken about a year off. He has been looking at, obviously, he looked at Nebraska last year, so he's been looking at the Big Ten a little bit. I'll be curious to see how he kind of reimagines himself as an offensive coordinator. Kind of similar to how, Chip Kelly's been trying to go through that process almost at Ohio State,
Yeah, and that this is very reminiscent of a Chip Kelly, a head coach that's been well known on a national level that's taking this coordinator role. You mentioned two things there. You said points, and you say he took the year off. Coach Rhule talked about him taking some time off there, and that he brought him in obviously earlier over the offseason. So my guess is, he's kept Nebraska in mind for a while now. I doubt last week was the first time he started watching film of us for the first time. Let's just put it that way. But points was something that Coach Rhule also focused on today. And he goes, I like to score points, because he was asked specifically about run and pass. And at this point, we just, what gets the ball in the end zone, what scores points is crucial. I will always tell you, in Nebraska and in this conference and in this climactic region that we're in, we need to be able to run the ball. We've got to be able to get under center and do those things. Coach Rhule today also brought up, the fact that when he went and coached at West Virginia, he was coaching up in a northern climate, and that that and get a run game going over there too. So you look at his history of offenses from a run percentage and a yardage per game. We went through this driving through Denver a couple of days ago. I went through every single season of it, and there were a couple of years that looked a lot like what we're at right now, which is about 124 yards a game. But then there were a couple of seasons where he was averaging 200 plus, and in the upper 100s. And so it's kind of all over the place. I'm sure that kind of is dependent upon his personnel and everything. But if nothing else, I don't know what this is going to mean for long term. I don't know if this is going to be, he's going to be our OC for next season or for the next 5, or if he's just doing it for 3 games. But at the very least, for a program that needs to get to a bowl game, desperately needs to, and we have 3 opportunities to do it. This was, I just feel it was a good move because it created something, some excitement, a spark, anything that it can create to get that offense out of neutral is a good move right now.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe the offense, right? I mean, what did I see? The number was 100 in points, 99th in yards, or something like that, vice versa. And honestly, it was much better when we were 5-1 the last 3 games in general. But even since Big Ten play, really, right? Let's be honest with you, right? I mean, like UTEP 40 points, had 28 against Colorado in the first half, and none of the second. Northern Iowa only 34, and really have not been as explosive. I think Holgorsen has to like this opportunity in the sense there's quite a bit of tools in that tool belt from the wide receiver position with Barney and Lloyd, and with the Nayor and Banks. You got a lot of different combinations, and he'll know how to use them. I'll be really interested to see how he can scheme some guys open, right? Because that's what we've really struggled with. And I would say that Holgorsen and the air raid in general is a QB-friendly offense, right? It's not known to be the most complicated system. It's generally you need to kind of know your pre-snap reads and where you want to go. And it should be, depending on how healthy Dylan is, or Heinrich for that matter, to not have to scan the entire field looking downfield 20 yards for 4 or 5 different options, but actually trying to make it easier. And I think that is, in this instance, with only 3 games left, really critical.
Yeah, anything to do to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quicker, make those quicker decisions. There was a play against UCLA, and they had 2 tight ends, and they were lined up on the right side of the field. And we were about at midfield roughly during this one. And they roll Dylan out. And from where we were sitting, we were about 9th row, and we were right behind kind of where the play was and had a good view behind it. It was rolled out to where it was designed to be quick and get rid of that ball. He had 1 or 2 receiver options. If not, go run it for 5 yards and slide. Do that. And Dylan stopped, turned around, did a 180 and ran it back into the into the middle of the field and then threw it out of bounds. It's that combination of the quarterback. Either the quarterback is he's that flustered to that point, or he has too much going on in his head. Like, that play call was designed to be quick thinking. Roll out one or two options, run it or throw it, and move on. And there's just a disconnect somewhere. And I think disconnect is almost that could be the name of our offense this year. We could just put it up on the wall. We were the disconnect offense because
we pulled the plug.
Well, that's kind of what, Satterfield and Rhule have felt like for being as close as they've been and worked together. For most of the season, we've heard one thing in a press conference about what they want, and then you'd see something else that weekend. And so I'm all about running the football and let's get under center and commit to it. I mean, I've been saying that forever. And then you'd hear Rhule, or you'd hear Satterfield saying that a couple of press conferences, that, I just need to commit to this. But even when he says it, it just doesn't see itself to Saturday.
Yeah. It doesn't translate. Yeah.
Yeah. So that will be interesting there. There's a video here. I want to do one more here, just a little more background that Rhule has with Dana, just to kind of give everyone a real good sense of, these two guys have known each other for a while, coached against each other. So this just gives a little more background here.
I think it goes all the way back to me going to the convention as a young assistant and sitting and listening to him talk, and then coached against him when he was at West Virginia. Saw the evolution of what he did there in terms of, going to a cold weather place, running the football, but still being really explosive, winning. We're represented by the same people, so we see each other at a lot of different places. He's friends with my wife and I. He would come to Charlotte quite a bit, and so just someone I respect as a coach. This is it's not a friend thing. It's more of a I just respect him. I respect what he's done. He got done last year and probably needed some time, and I called him last week and said, hey, can you come in and help? So he and Phil came in and kind of looked through everything, and I think he felt confident. I think he likes, as he said to me, he likes our coaches, he likes our players, and felt like he could help.
He said Phil there, Dave. That Phil Snow. So that was the other coach that was here. And I know a lot of people have asked that question of, like, well, what was Phil Snow brought in for? Our defense hasn't certainly been any major issue. What was the significance there? Do you have any thoughts on that or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be on the defensive side. Obviously, he's a former D coordinator, but he runs a different defense than Tony White. I almost would be curious if it was actually to look at the offense and see what if there was tells, right? Like, we were too predictable, and asking him from a D coordinator perspective, like, what's giving this away? Because this play works in practice, but it doesn't seem to work in a game. And I think there's, the classic example is, again, the tackles, whether their hands on the ground or not, right? It gets called out by the sideline reporter on TV. That's not a good look, but there's probably even far more nuanced tells that other coaching staffs may have identified. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if Phil at least looked at that as well. Yeah,
I think that's a big discussion that we were having together over the offseason or over the weekend and watching games out there was, this offense, there's a lot of good parts to it. There's good players. I mean, we've got 5-star quarterbacks and 4-star receivers and 4-star running backs and all that stuff, but it's been disjointed. And bringing in an OC that can help out, bringing in a DC that can look at it and bring a different set of eyes. You can't expect Tony White to be the guy doing a self scout on our offense when we have to be preparing for USC's offense and a new quarterback that they're going to be playing. Tony White's got his hands full there with that. So I tend to agree with you there, that I think that, bringing in a coach like Phil Snow too, to be able to just look at things, just evaluate where are we at right now, and to bring a different set of eyes against our offense. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. There's one other thing, another video I wanted to show here, and this was one that Coach Rhule talked about. It was the trend in college football, kind of hiring and firing coaches, and what he sees happening right now. I want to get your thoughts after this.
The kind of the genesis of this was, I think, what you're going to see now as coaches get fired. I think you'll start to see coaches like leaving maybe even before bowl games and coaching bowl games, and so the players can have some familiarity with them. And You know, I think that, you know, that was kind of in my head of like, hey, I think, you know, you've seen coaches take jobs now and then go there and coach the bowl game. When I went to Baylor, I sat out and didn't do that, you know, and so I didn't really have a chance to know the players till mid-spring. And so last Sunday, you know, I appreciate all the work our staff has done. I love how hard they've grinded and cared about the kids and done their best and you know, produced some good moments. And I felt like we needed some help, and so I just thought this was, you know, the right thing to do. You know, at the end of the day, like, it might be bold, it might be unique. And again, I didn't bring him at first with that. You know, I said, hey, come and see. And I think as he got here, he felt comfortable. And, you know, Marcus walked in right away and was like, tell me everything you need. And Glenn did the same thing. And Garrett said, I can translate this into your language. And, you know, so, and then Dana's obviously, you know, he's really, really a smart guy offensively. He can figure out kind of what we're doing and what we do well. So
bringing him in before the bowl game. I mean, that's
yeah, really interesting. So, I mean, let's attack the back half of that first, and then go back to the bigger picture thing. I mean, Rhule is a unique guy from our history of Nebraska football, because he's not really a defense or offensive coach, right? He is a head coach. He's always had his own, you know, he says he's, you know, defensive minded, but he's not a defensive coordinator himself per se, right? And then has gone through various different offensive schemes. And so, I mean, for him to be able to step back, he said on Sunday, he's like, I stepped back and, you know, wanted to hear some outside voices because we're just weren't doing well enough, right? And he acknowledged all the hard work the coaches had been putting in, but it wasn't any sort of tangible evidence on the field. So for him to make the move, it's easier to do in that position because it's not his offense or his defense per se, right? To make this type of decision midstream. So, you know, kudos to him for acknowledging what we were all seeing as fans and saying, hey, we can do better, and why not do better right now opposed to waiting 3 more games and hoping we have a bowl game to prepare for. And then the fact that in the future, how this is going to play out, I think he's right, because without having a limited number of coaches now, you can do this where you can just bring in a 12th or 13th or 14th coach. Satterfield can easily just move to the tight ends. Whether Satterfield is here next year or not is irrelevant at this point. He's here for the next month or two. But we can bring someone in like this and really make some potential critical changes to kind of save a season that started off really, really well. And so, yeah, I think other coaches aren't going to wait around either, right? You know, if you're fighting for your job, you're only going to get 3 years to try to get your program going in the right direction. You're going to make the moves when you have to make them.
Yeah, I think it's hard sometimes for fans right now to decipher like what is being done strategically for the long term versus what do you have to do right now? Like he talks about bringing in a coach before the bowl game, and then that gives you a head start towards the spring, towards the off season, everything. You're already that much further ahead, which is awesome. That's from a strategy standpoint, that's great. Is Holgorsen going to be here next year? You know, is this a stopgap for, you know, the last month of the season, you know, hopefully get us to that bowl game, or is this something that can build into a you know, next season and beyond? Because, you know, Holgorsen could obviously have other options after the season's done as well. Maybe he wants to get back into head coaching. Maybe this is a trend of guys like Chip Kelly who, you know what?
Yeah,
I can make plenty of money as a coordinator, and I have all the resources I need here, and I can get some good players, and I can just call plays and not have to deal with that other stuff.
Holgorsen and Kelly, very similar from some of their weaknesses of head coaches has similar traits, right? Neither one of them liked glad handing boosters or really, you know, focusing on recruiting, right? They are X's and O's guys who want to do that. And in the modern day Big Ten, you can be a $2 million OC if you're really good at it and not have to do a bunch of that other stuff. Especially when you already have a 5-star quarterback and a couple other quarterbacks that are been in the system now. So yeah, no, I get it, and I think, I mean, if I was betting, I think Holgorsen will be here next year for just at least one season. But
Mhm.
you're right, we don't know. We
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, and
Good
like you
question.
said earlier about, Rhule really doesn't come from a background being the OC or the DC. In fact, a lot of the coaches that have been on Rhule staffs are guys that have coached on both sides of the ball in multiple different
Yeah.
position groups. But
Yep.
I think that's a good way of thinking. Like, I like tying Holgerson and Chip Kelly in that sense together, kind of like great offensive minds. They weren't terrible head coaches, but they also, maybe there's some things of being the head coach they don't really want to do. They
Yeah.
want to be that offensive guy. Coach Rhule, conversely, he loves the head coaching gig of it. I don't think he wants to come in and step in
No.
and take over Tony's defense or Sat's offense if they're
Mm-mm.
struggling. That's not his thing. He wants to be the CEO. And I guess, one of the things the CEO has to do is be able to pivot quickly and make changes like this and take that step back on Sundays of a bye week. And he'd already talked about the bye week, prior to that we'd been playing these teams that were after buys, and they had, look at all the things that they had done over the 2 weeks preparing for us. And we were critical about that, saying, okay, well, what are we going to do then? We've got to,
Yeah.
what changes are we going to do? Because the last bye week we had was leading up to the Indiana game, and our team didn't come out real strong there. So I think that's where I'm satisfied right now as a fan that I have no idea what the next 3 games are going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
but I'm totally satisfied that we don't have a coach who's, just, sitting on his hands saying, well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out later. It's the Iowa effect of, how many years with Ferentz's kid at OC,
Yeah.
where they'd be
Yeah.
frustrated. And it's just the same thing over and over again. I mean, that's not happening here. So hopefully good things result from this. Good, we produce some more points. You mentioned, with the quarterback there, he has a 5-star quarterback. We don't know what Dylan's health is going to be this week. They said they're going to try him out at practice tomorrow. So that's, they said the try word. It doesn't mean he's definitely going to be playing.
Yeah.
But one kid to also keep into this mix now is Danny Kalen, who with the full
because
game
now
red
he
shirt,
doesn't have a redshirt issue at all. He's got 4 games to play no matter what. So
yeah, he hasn't played at all this season. He has 4 games to play, and we only have 3 left. So yeah, he could come out there at any time. Harburg, obviously a little bit of a follow up to the last game. UCLA, obviously Harburg got out there in the last possession and a half and did some things okay. It was a tough position for him to get into, but we're not in a bad spot at QB in that sense of at least having Harburg there available, ready to go. And now we have Kalen on top of that. So, the depth has kind of changed. For the first 8 games, we had 2 quarterbacks, Dylan and Harburg. Now we have 2 quarterbacks, Harburg and Kalen, if Dylan isn't able to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think something that Satterfield struggled with, and it's interesting. We were doing the show yesterday, like we talked about. That's all we'd be talking about is complaining about Satterfield. At least I would be anyway. You've heard enough of it over the last 3 days, but the narrative changed. To your point, you're excited to see what's happening, and I mean, you can change the narrative on a time like this. Satterfield really struggled with getting Harburg into the game as much as we all thought preseason. We were like, oh, this guy's going to be like a Taysom Hill guy. He'll bring him in. Yeah, he might be at the quarterback at a wildcat thing, but they're going to move him around. They're going to line him up at tight end. He'll be in for 5 different plays, and maybe one of them he'll take a snap at quarterback, but it'll be at 4 other positions, right? No, it didn't really happen. They've sprinkled him in very sporadically. It hasn't really seemed like there's a lot of rhyme and reason behind it. Even if you've seen this with Penn State with their Drew Aller, their 5-star quarterback, has been spelled by their running QB for a drive here or there just to give the defenses something else to prepare for. We couldn't even do that. So I'll be curious if Holgorsen takes a different approach by managing those 2 quarterbacks. So that's going to be intriguing. You're right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and you and I sat there yesterday and we watched a lot of pro football. We watched a lot of college football on Saturday, but we were watching pro football yesterday too. And one of the things we talked about with pro football was that as opposed to 30 years ago, where kind of every offense, it was just kind of all
the statue
homogenized into one same offense everyone ran. Now, in the pros, there was a lot of interesting things going on. So we were just watching plays. And before almost every play, there's some kind of pre-snap, there's motion and there's shifts and there's different things going on. There's eye candy in that sense. And then teams also getting creative with some of their personnel packages, getting H-backs into the backfield. When you think of like Harburg, and look, if he's not the quarterback, then what role is he? Well, he's probably going to be some kind of H-back kind of guy. And we'd hear it. This is that disconnect because we run the disconnect offense all year. The disconnect was, hey, this guy's going to go out there and he's going to, we need to play him. He's this talented and all that. And then you just never see him on the field. And we have 3 more games. A fourth of the season is yet to be played. And that's, to me, that's a bit of the
let's hope it's 4 more games, right?
Well, yeah, just of the regular season, we have 3 more games left. And then that bowl game, then those practices. And I'm on your side here, Dave, with this. I think that, they didn't specifically say it. I think Holgorsen, he's preparing himself to be the OC here next year. And so not only getting that bowl game is huge for all the reasons that we've said for 7 years, it's important for us to get that monkey off our back. But now getting an extra 20 or 15, whatever practices it is, with that guy on staff already, everything that Coach Rhule just said there about that trend in college football, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you read between the lines of how he answered that question, about, I didn't do that when I went to Baylor, and he didn't have a chance to meet and familiarize himself with all the players. And that's what he's saying Dana gets a chance to do right now. He wouldn't be indicating that if he wasn't thinking he'd be here for at least one off season, and thinking about, who do we need on the roster and all those type of things. So, I would think that it's also could be attractive. We don't want to spend the whole offseason in the transfer portal, but if this offense does click a little bit and we have at least one good offensive game out of these 3, they're going to be able to point to that and say, hey, look, we've got not only a quarterback, but an OC that's exciting. And whether you're a wide receiver or running back, we should continue to build depth and talent. So,
Well, I'll close out the videos, at least on Rhule, talking about why Holgorsen here. He goes, it just made sense, and I tend to agree here.
I feel like, if I'm being honest about myself, if I look back, I think, we've always done a good job of playing really good defense. We've always done a good job of being physical. We've always done a really good job of developing players. When we've had good offenses, we've won games. And so Dana, when I think about what he's done, going to Oklahoma State, what he did there, going to West Virginia, the run game that they had, I competed against them. It was really, really physical, tough team. And so it just made sense to me.
Physical, developing players. He's competed against them. I mean, that's makes sense. Makes sense to me too.
I'm curious from your perspective as run the damn ball guy. We already read through the numbers. He may not be as much of that as possible, but he has run the ball. He, to your point, had with not 200 yards a game, close to that several times, and decent balance. From an offensive line play, does things need to change at all? Obviously, that would be really difficult in the next 3 weeks. But I mean, how would you block the air raid? I guess opposed to what?
Well, you mentioned it earlier on this show, and I haven't even brought it up this year. I was bringing it. It was something I was saying last season, and I was going game by game. I was tracking, just watching our tackles, and are they in a 2-point stance or a 3-point stance? I wasn't even paying attention to it this year because, to be 100% honest, we had other things on offense that I was looking at. And then when it kind of came back around against UCLA, it was like, really, is that still a thing? But like the most basic of tells is if you've got a tackle and he's standing up when you're throwing it, and you have a tackle who's in a 3-point stance when you're running it, and 90% of the time or 80% of the time you feel like that's the giveaway. I mean, you're just setting yourself up for failure because the defense can just pin its ears back one way or the other. And I think that was some of the things against UCLA particularly too. I had a couple of fraternity brothers that came in from out of state. And so we were watching the game together in the stadium. It's the only game I've actually been at the stadium for this year. And we're watching it. And, there was the play where Barney got lined up behind the tackle, kind of hid behind the tackle. And before they snap it, I'm like, well, this is the reverse to Barney, unless we have something that we play off of it. But we didn't. We just handed it off to Barney, and it went for negative yards because you can't become that predictable. I mean, if podcasters are seeing this, or sideline reporters are noticing the tackle standing. And that gets back to that point of, other teams and defensive coordinators and all that in the Big Ten. They're going to be smart and they're going to pick up on these things. And we have some really good players, but it just felt like as the season has gone on, we've never built off of some of the early success. Mac and I have done the Matt's Rhule. We did them for the whole first half of the season. And we've gotten a little bit busy the last few weeks, and plus some of the games we didn't really feel like we needed to break down the film of it. But go back and watch our midseason review show that we did. We were 5-1 at the time, and we were talking. We were actually catching flack from some of the Redcasters. We were catching some flack because we're happy with the record. We were happy being 5-1, but we were also saying the things. Look at the film. Look at what the film's showing. This is where we need to get better on offense, or we need to build off of this. So if we've run a play like this, what's the counter to it? When's the time that Dylan's going to run the ball? That's been a big thing. QB run game. We've done so many things to set it up, but we just never take it. My gosh, how many countless examples do we have to have at this point? The defenses, they don't honor him as a runner. They shouldn't. And it's more than just a couple of scrambles against Ohio State. You've got to be able to be willing 4 times a game, 6 times a game, maybe about once a quarter, to pull it and run with it, and then be smart, slide, get out of bounds. I've said this so many times. I'm not asking you to be Adrian Martinez. I don't want that out of Dylan, but he has to do enough with his legs. And there we are watching pro football, Dave. Yeah. And that's what got us into our discussion about pro football in 30 years ago. When I talk about wanting a running quarterback or a quarterback that goes out there and runs, I've heard people, oh, come on, Honky, this isn't the 90s and, stop living in the past kind of thing. No. That's not it at all. I want a QB who can be mobile and stress a defense with his legs. In fact, when somebody thinks that a quarterback has to be a statue in the pocket to throw it, that's living in the past, because that's what quarterbacks back in the 80s and 90s were. You watch, what did we see yesterday? When you're looking at, Allen at Buffalo, and you're looking at Mahomes, who Dylan emulates his game off
Broncos.
Bo Nix. All these guys are moving around. Jalen Hurts, they're moving around the pocket. They're still throwing quarterbacks. They're still, keeping their eyes downfield, but they stress the defense with the legs. And that's an area that Dylan really needs to be able to build off of over the offseason. And if he gets that added to his game with the arm that we know he has, my goodness.
If at the end of the day, he wants to be in the NFL. You need to be able to move a pocket and to have some sort of run threat, scrambling, rambling on a 3rd and 5 because everyone's covered up, but you can see the line of gain at the corner of your eye, and you're going to go after it, right? It happens all the time with quarterbacks that are not run first by any means, or even showed that in college. You just have to have enough of that. And I think he gets that. He knows Patrick Mahomes does it too, right? So. It'll be intriguing to see how this evolves and looks here. I hope it works enough that we can just definitely get one of these before this change. We're we can go 0-3 in these, or we can go 3-0, somewhere in between. Anything could happen. It's not like USC, who's just made a quarterback change, Wisconsin, who will be coming off a game at Oregon, I think. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. They play Oregon.
And then Iowa, who is also now, struggling with, they also lost to UCLA. Look, all 3 of them can beat us. They could lose. We can beat all 3 of them, right?
Yeah. And I think it's ingrained in us over the last 7 seasons to just lay our hands down, just say, well, it's gotten bad. The season's getting worse. Last year we lost all the chasing 3 stuff. We lost all these close games. Season's just going to get worse. You just you start going to the off season, and it's barely November. And so that I started I tweeted a couple things out about a week or 2 ago with fans where I was like, you only get these 12 weeks a year. And then we had this long off season where we always have to, it's the longest off season ever until you get back to the football season. It's let's not jump there. Let's not jump to what coaches need to be fired and what we need to do in the off season. We've got 3 games left. Empty the bank on whatever it takes to get better now. Yeah. And this isn't just an offensive coordinator thing. You and I were talking about how many times on special teams, how many bad snaps have we had on field goals all year? And I'm empty the bank on whatever it takes to if you have to put your starting center out there to snap and get good snaps, then figure it out. You've got 3 games left. The perimeter blocking hasn't been good. Hey, there's this guy named Ron Brown who used to coach our receivers when that's all they were known for were blocking. He's on staff. He's part of that large staff. Help him, whatever you have to do. There's just no excuse to have to wait until the offseason to make some basic changes that can improve the play on the field now. That's what we need. And so I'm really impressed with the move by Rhule here to not wait, to let's figure it out. We've seen it with UCLA, with Foster, the coach, first year guy and everything. Well, he struggled at times, but that team seems to be getting better as the season's going on. And I'm sure we have a better record than they do right now. It doesn't matter. They beat us, and they seem like they have momentum. They have the momentum going, and we don't. This is a move to try to get some momentum going, and so I'm completely on board with it. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, again, I mean, as frustrating as this has been, we're sitting at 5-4, and USC is maybe 4-5 actually. Wisconsin's 5-4, Iowa right there. So look, I mean, even Minnesota, who's excited that they're 6-4, is just 6-4, right? With a bye week coming, right? So it's maybe not the beautiful 9-win season that we initially, kind of dreamed up in our heads in that long off season, but it doesn't mean that these 3 games can't get this thing turned around. And the value of the bowl game practices, I mean, to your point of making the move now, boy, getting 15 more practices would be great. It's been a long time.
Imagine what a win this weekend would do. Imagine what going into the Coliseum and being a USC team would do for the confidence of now you got your 6th win and you've moved on with that. But then you start looking ahead to now Wisconsin's coming to Lincoln, Nebraska, and Wisconsin's coming off of a bad loss to Oregon, and we're getting some momentum going. Football is such a game of momentum from week to week. And I'll put my Rob hat on for a second, and I'll drink the Kool-Aid for a second. We can still win 9 games, but it starts by winning this one. And then you get better and you win those last 2. You go to a bowl game, you win one. It's still even out there for those fans, but nothing was going to happen if changes didn't happen. That's the one conclusive thing that I'm 100% positive in, is that they needed to make some changes there to get a spark, if nothing else. That we were just stuck in neutral. And so, want to show one more video here, Dave. This was Holgorsen on the current staff. What Rhule talked about with Holgorsen, working with the staff, since this is, if it's going to work, it's these guys that are going to make it work here over the last 3 weeks.
It's like, the first day Dana said to me, he watched practice. He's like, man, you got really good coaches. I'm watching them out there. I'm watching EJ, I'm watching Donnie, I'm watching Sat, I'm watching Glenn, I'm watching Garrett. There's great coaches here. We just have to find the things that our guys do well. Let's just do those things and eliminate all the other stuff. And so, so Sat's out there coaching the tight ends. Garrett's coaching the wideouts. Donnie's coaching the O-line. Glenn's coaching the quarterbacks. EJ's coaching the running backs. And anything that Dana needs, he's they're helping him. He's not. You can't come in and change the offense. You can't come in and install the air raid. You can't come in and. We're in week 11, as you said, but you can come in and say, hey, what are the things that we do well? Who are the guys that make plays, and let's figure out how to do it with those guys. So I think that's the big picture that I think he's doing right now.
What are the things we do well, and who are the guys making plays? That's, if you can get those 2 things, working. Rob, by the way, Dave just confirmed they're winning the last 3 games. Someone passed him the Kool-Aid. I don't know if Dave said that, Rob, but I think I said that. Mark here says quietly rooting for a turnaround and bowling for NU. Just not going to say anything about coaching changes in season, as many here said about the Buffs. There is. I am convinced more than ever there is no one right way to do any of this anymore.
Absolutely.
There's so many countless examples of where it worked and didn't work when teams have tried different things. The Buffs are a great. I will say this about the Buffs. When we beat them the way we did, I thought that team was going to fold. I absolutely did. All the offseason talk of their locker room issues and everything's like, oh, well, that team's not even built to face the adversity they're going to do. And to that extent, good on them. whether you like them or not. You can watch the
Yep.
video of
Yep.
the Sanders, Shadur, yelling at a ball boy at Texas Tech and all that. Personality wise, you throw that aside. What they've done is working for them, and it's a very
Yeah.
different strategy than what Coach Rhule is wanting to do here, which is build something over the long term. So today's move, to me, for it to really feel like it's part of the goal, is that I want to see Holgorsen be here next year. I mean, I don't want just to be a reactionary 3-week thing. Like, this is part of from day one, Rhule's talked about this thing being a build and the foundation and building it the right way. And this can be consistent with that. It can be but part of that is expecting kind of to see this go from here to next year. And even a year or two down the road, I'd like to see that.
Yeah. So background on Honky and my weekend, we go out on Saturday and we do this every year, and we end up hopping around the lower downtown area of Denver and meeting other fan bases that are playing that week. And so the first one we stopped at was the Swamp of the Rockies, where the Gators are playing. At that moment, they're already down 35-0, I believe, at half to Texas. Yep. And it was not exactly the most active bar scene there, but we did run into some Gators who had been going there for 30 years and were very, very familiar with the 90s. They were probably about our age. And we had a great conversation for a couple hours. And with that exact topic of there's so many different ways to do this, right? And it's a matter of you got to find out what's going to work for you. And I guess what I'm most happy about with this decision from Rhule is that he acknowledged that even though he likes Marcus Satterfield and he's a great stand-up guy, his data, his stats have never told you that he was going to be a great offensive coordinator here. It was more about hey, we're just going to have a good complementary offense with that defense. I don't know if that's complementary. That'll be interesting to see what Tony White's the defense looks like if it has to be on the field a little bit more, because somehow we've scored quickly. Whoa. But if you look at Dana Holgorsen's offenses, he produces points and yards, right? So let's see what that looks like together with Tony White's offense. And if that's going to be the case next year, let's start on it right now.
Yeah. Geez. How amazing would that be? Let's, put on the Kool-Aid helmet for a second, but just how amazing would it be to see this offense click over the last 3 weeks, get some points going, and then to really be that building. I'd still love to see Tony White here one more season. The guy, that'd be great if we could get another year of him there. But I mean, Coach Rhule said that this is not. We haven't had a defensive issue here for 2 years. The defense has been pulling its weight, and all the news from today too. We're still not talking about, and we don't have time today just to go into it. But we still aren't talking about special teams and how special teams needs to be special. You're a Broncos fan, Dave, and we're sitting there watching that game yesterday, and Kansas City, remains undefeated, 9-0, and they've won some games with their defense, and we know what their offense can do. But how'd they win that game? They block a 35-yard field goal. How many pro teams yesterday, Dave, missed field goals?
Yeah,
it was a bizarre day of
it. Kickers.
And Nebraska, look, I referenced Iowa a couple of times in this conversation because we were talking offensively, but how did Iowa win all these games that we haven't over the last 5 and 6 and 7 years when they've had an offense that can't put up any more than what ours is? It's because their defense plays defense like ours pretty much does right now, but their special teams blow us away and have consistently blown us away. And Iowa could win a bunch of games, close games, just by having those two elements of the field work for them. We've had to hold teams under Rhule so far. We've had to hold teams to 14 or less points if we wanted to beat them. That's what every one of our wins has been, is we've held the defense, we've held the other team to 14 or less points. That's crazy. Really hard to do defensively, and it's even doubly hard to do when your special teams isn't doing much to help you out there either. So, this all the news about today didn't just magically make our special teams better or anything, but it's a start.
Yeah. It definitely, we needed something, right? To your point, I mean, we saw so much football this weekend, and you kept on seeing punt returns and kickoff returns that they actually got yardage off of, and you're like, What? How is that possible? Is that legal? You know,
A punt return. It has been so long since we've just seen a punt return. You know, and by the way, I'm ecstatic that he's catching the ball right now. That's a start over where
our
we've been
expectations
over the
were
number
so
of years.
low on that part of the game, right? Oh my goodness. All right,
Andy,
Honk. Well, this has been
Dave Honky. How are the
good fun.
Denver special teams field goal block not on practice squad ASAP?
I don't know.
Thank you, man. It's copycat league, right?
Oh, that would have been a sweet victory. It would have been good. It's been a long time since we beat the Chiefs, so I'm tired of them. All right, Honk, is there anything else you wanna talk about? Anything else you wanna bring up?
Let's go to parting shots.
Let's get out of here. Go for it.
Well, you brought it up. The weekend. I mean, we were going to do a show prior to this just to do one together. We hadn't done one. I don't know if you and I, other than one basketball post game show we did like 3 years ago, I don't know if you and I have ever just done a show together, just the two of us. And that's the kind of the fun thing with the Redcast is we've, you know, my gosh, what we're doing now with Abby
roster
and roster. I mean, we can do all these different kinds of like lineups and everything. And Mac and I have done our Matt's rules and stuff, but it was fun. Like you and I, we do our tradition and we do the Denver weekend. I have a blast every year doing it. Denver is one of the most unique areas, Lodo, the lower downtown, because they have so many transplant people that live there that have moved from other places. So there's all these watch sites. And so this year we didn't even do it as much as some of the other years where it's earlier in the year and there's some, you know, more people are out, you know, not everyone's teams have tanked it like the Florida fans did.
And it wasn't, it's not snowing.
Yeah. But, you know, we would go from the Kansas State bar to the Florida bar to the Iowa bar to the Wisconsin, you know, and you get to watch the games with their fans. You know, even if it's just 15 or 20 minutes of a game, and then you get a little bit of their traditions. We've jumped around after the third quarter at Wisconsin bar, and
we heard Tom Petty play this time.
Yeah, Tom Petty, and they do the chomp and all that. And so I don't know. It's an interesting way to watch football. It's fun to do that. You get a lot of perspectives from a lot of fans all across the country. I always wear my Husker stuff. You wear your Husker stuff, and I love the questions we get from people. I mean, there's there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
The national perception or some of them, you know, you guys giving up or no, we'll never give up. It's just, if this isn't working, then you're going to move on to the next one that does work. And I would say today is one more example of that in the history of Husker football here is we clearly had an area that wasn't working and a change was made.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with it.
That's right. It should be a fun month, and let's, Dave got recognized at Lotus. That's right. Anyway, it was a fun time, and hopefully this change today will give some spark to the Nebraska fan base, and maybe we'll get to see one or two more wins and hopefully a bowl game. So that is the goal, right?
Three more wins in a bowl game. Let's get to 9 wins. Let's do it. You know, all right?
Heck yeah.
But it starts this week. Win this week against USC. Get that bowl game monkey off the back, and then and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I would feel a lot better.
Yeah.
All right, Honk. Been a lot of fun. Enjoyed getting back on the show with you. Thanks for coming out for the weekend. And for now, let's call that another Go Big Redcast.
Go Big Red.
A Herd at Sports Network production.